So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I think we all know that the data shows that we have an issue with HPA attainment in the school. It's an issue that we want to address, and I've been talking to Ruth very specifically about something that we might do across our CMAT. So, this is specifically attached to mathematics, and again, if we go back to earlier part of the meeting to weaknesses, you'll see that leadership in mathematics is a weakness for us at the moment. Outcomes, although much better last summer, are not yet where we want them to be, and I would like to unlock some of the potential and power of our math to help us to raise achievement in mathematics. So the issues then for us are that both our data at English Martyrs and our sister school in Loughborough, Delisle, they're not achieving the progress they should be. The students not achieving the progress they should be. Our recent learning walks by the deputy heads from 4 secondary schools suggests that a contributory factor may be that questioning shows lack of challenge. I'm going to just move over to Bernadette because it'll be much easier for me to see this way around. Yeah, that's better, much better. Another constituent element of this is that both of our schools have a commitment to a mastery curriculum of mathematics at Key Stage 3. If you don't know already what is a mastery curriculum, well, it stems from curricula in Asia. It's been very popular, growing in popularity over the last 10 years. Highly recommended because students can see rapid improvement in their mathematics. It encourages deep thinking and making relations between concepts studied and ensuring that there's a deep and secure knowledge at each stage of learning so that children are building on that knowledge before they go to the next step. And it's to make sure that all the building blocks are in place, because one of the things that really impacts on a child's ability to use mathematics is when they've missed something. And I know one of the discussions I frequently have with parents about, oh, they're only going to be out of school, Mr. Carney, for just those 2 weeks of that holiday in wherever. And I say, but in those 2 weeks in the curriculum in math, they'll be studying this, that's when we do it. And so easily you can pull away some of the stays, and then they're not able to do what they need to do. And typically, we all know the times table example, but of course, there's so much more than that. But the query and question, and it's not just for us, it's a question that's been raised nationally about this approach, is that does mastery's insistence on each building block being secure in some way hold back higher attainers? Or is our delivery of the curriculum in this fashion not sufficiently tailored or demanding HPA? So there's a question to investigate there. If we triangulate this a bit from work in our primary schools that Ruth and Martin have done, our primary schools likewise have mastery curriculum. Some primary schools are achieving better than others, and we're now part of a CMAT, so we can actually talk to one another and say, well, what's going on in our primary school classrooms, what's going on in our Key Stage 3 classrooms? Is it the mastery approach that is a bit of a problem here, or is it this type and style of our teaching? So, hypothesis then for us, and I think an opportunity for this project, is that it's fair to say at the moment the mastery approach is serving our middle prior attainers better than our HPA. So just to come back to the previous presentation, as Andy said, all our basics at 4 and 5 absolutely in place. The tracking is excellent. The minute we look at 7s and 8s, the tracking is not meeting national averages. So that's a problem for us. So maybe if we then look at the learning walk examples and say, well, some of the questioning isn't sufficiently challenging, is it that people are so busy drilling that they're not asking those great questions they could be, or giving the problems to young people to solve. So my thought is, how can we use the strength of our CMAT strategically to determine which is the case really, and to address the issues which appear to be common to both our schools in Loughborough and here, but also, of course, using the evidence that we can find from primary schools. I'm conscious that the project that we run, we want to do rapidly, swiftly, and it is one of those things that could go off in every direction.
It's a huge area.
So we really want to keep it focused as tightly as possible. So I've spoken to Ruth, and we've agreed to convene and direct a team of maths professionals and other leaders as well to explore these issues and refine our understanding of what's going on. I mean, it could be that our hypothesis is not on track at all, and it may be that, you know, the students in let's say in Loughborough are doing twice as much homework as they're doing in English Martyrs, and that's making all the difference, you know, there. I'll just throw that out. We don't quite know what we'll find until we go looking. We have some ideas, we want to test them. In our lessons then we're going to explore how the curriculum is delivered, focusing on the HPAs. How well are those students learning? Why is there a gap? What's the student's view? What's the teacher's experience? And do groupings make a difference? So, you know, how, if children in primary school and they're all of the HPAs are on a table together, or similar kind of structures in secondary schools, does that make a difference? What's going on? So practically, we're going to visit, see practice in at least one primary school and our 2 secondary schools. We'll use international research, then look at what's happened elsewhere as well, and devise a pilot intervention for teacher CPD and in the students' programmes of study, hopefully, to see some improvement in this, because that's obviously the aim. And we'll implement that trial project to, as I say, hopefully effect improvement. And at the moment, we're starting out with the hypothesis that there's the questions and the challenges that will make the difference. The team then is going to be the head of mathematics at Delisle, Chris, and he's very kindly agreed to be part of this, which is fabulous. Richard, who's our lead teacher for Key Stage 3 mathematics, many of you have met him. He's been very involved in the local maths network, in the East Midlands hub. Had lots of different training and mastery maths. Ruth, who's here with us, Martin, her colleague in primary, the MAT, and then hopefully we may drag in a teacher or 2 here and there. Hopefully we can persuade some people to let us see what they're doing, so we get a sufficiently wide evidence base. We can't, as I say, make it too big. We're going to have to draw some conclusions very quickly. But at the same time, we don't want to just base it on one classroom's worth of data and knowledge. So that's really the general gist of the project. Then we're going to do some planning meetings, hopefully in the next fortnight, research activities, refining goals by the end of February, and then put the trial project in, finishing at the end of April, so that we can share the findings with other colleagues in the summer term, and if needs be, change some of the practice that's going on in English Martyrs in Delisle. And the all-important thing is to see those young people make better progress than we're seeing on the data that I showed you in the previous presentation, because that, you know, can't be allowed to stick like that. So I'm very excited about this, and I'm happy to take questions or thoughts about it.
Marius, can I ask, is there a possibility that the Key Stage 3 schemes of work are not fit for purpose? In other words, they're suppressing higher prior retainers rather than it be the curriculum. Is it actually that we are repeating a lot of what Key Stage 2 teaches?
Yeah, I think now we've had the raising standards at primary, I must admit, I don't think that secondaries are acknowledging that in Year 7. Because when I see my past students, they're actually saying, we were so worried about it, maths is easy in Year 7, we're covering everything we've just already done. I don't think secondary actually realise just how high the standards are raised in primary these days. I mean, when they're doing volume and teaching the mastery approach, they have to not just solve things, they have to say, it's abstract, it's pictorial, it's concrete. We're going back to kind of that basics. It's not just finding an answer, but what does it look like? They have to say, how do I know this? Can I prove it? They actually come up, I think, those ones that do get those higher attaining marks at primary have worked really hard to get those. They are very secure mathematicians.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether they hit the ground running in year 7.
Yeah. Well, I think that's certainly something that was brought to our attention in the recent maths review as well. And we want to look at that really in the journey through from year 5 right the way through to year 11, so that it's a seamless.
They're very skilled in things like, which I don't think you were years ago, in problem solving.
Yeah.
Years ago, you were a high retainer if you could do times tables like that and find an answer.
Yeah.
Now, the high retainers actually, I think, struggle at primary to start with because they don't like having to tell you how they did it. They don't like having to draw it. They're too clever for that. They want to give you an answer, and it's really having to change that mindset. And I actually think it's the high retainers that have struggled to adapt to mastery at primary, because they're so used just to giving you an answer and being told how brilliant they are,
Right.
rather than having to sit and say, I'll tell you how I got it.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do just know it, don't they,
Yes.
at primary, but now they have to say how they've done it. Can you show me a different way of doing it? Is there a different way? How could you explain it to somebody? I think, they really are true.
And that's where the skill comes in, because I've seen myself in some maths classes then teachers hearing the answer. One of our teachers, not Mr. Hamley actually, but another of the maths teachers, and he will then say, oh yeah, thanks Lisa, that's great that you gave me that answer, but I want to know.
That's it.
And actually, you see the face of the child going, but I gave you the right answer, why do you,
Yeah.
So actually maybe we need to be explaining more to students why they need to,
Our rule is, don't want the answer, I want the route to get there.
Yes.
With the whole whiteboard, says, no, don't want the answers, we want the how do you do it, is there another way you could have done it, can you draw it?
And that's one of the issues with the new, particularly with the new maths GCSE, is that it plays far more to the strength of a student who can take an idea and apply it in a new way. Students who just know how to do one thing and do it that way all the time struggle because the question doesn't look like that anymore. They've got to understand it and then be able to apply it to whatever the question asks you. Absolutely.
So they can apply it.
One of the challenges, though, we have in our maths specifically is that within the primary data, we know that children who achieve greater depth in Key Stage 1, who then follow the mastery curriculum, are not necessarily maintaining their greater depth at the end of Key Stage 2. So the one issue could be the pitch of the mastery curriculum at the transition from primary to secondary, but it could also be that there are some lessons that can be learned in terms of actually there are some concerns that our primaries are raising about the mastery curriculum and how well it is working for their higher power attainers, and whether or not this is something that we need to learn about, because in our secondary schools we're hearing more and more that the leaders want to follow a mastery approach in Key Stage 3. But are we learning the lessons at primary schools? We're already several years ahead.
Some teachers need to be convinced of how the mastery approach is so valuable. I do think that some teachers that I've had to convince it does work. I mean, our attainment at our school still needs to work, but our progress is good. From year 2 to year 6, our progress is good because we've been taught the past few years that mastery approach has really made progress at our school.
You just can stop there because each adult, and all those steps that they bring. And I think it's also part of the culture. If you go to a middle kind of class, you will see the students more willing to go through where they went wrong. And like you just mentioned, I did it, I got the answer, and it's right.
Yeah.
And when they don't get the answer, then becomes the problem.
I mean, I never liked level 6 at primary, because level 6, I was very successful at level 6, getting students to that stage. They didn't understand a word I taught them. I could teach them how to get to level 6. I used to actually feel quite bad feeling that I've not actually taught them to be level 6 standard. You're going to have to now have them at level 6 standard. And yet I don't think many of the ones I sent up to you at level 6 were true mathematicians.
And that really is meant to be the great advantage of the mastery approach,
Yeah.
because it should be
Exactly.
that people
But
have
whereas the
synthesised it
the
so
higher
well.
you're now getting,
Yeah.
they are those ones that are achieving the top levels in simplified these standards. They are the true mathematicians.
Yeah.
So when you've established, because it's really interesting, it's obviously a cross-phase
Phase
issue for
yeah.
us to look at. When you've established the things that could really make perhaps the lessons to be learned, how do you imagine that will be shared across the wider maths departments in the maths, obviously?
Yeah. Well, I think actually there's several audiences actually. The head teacher audience is one, and we're fortunate that we've got scheduled calendared head teachers meetings. So I think we might present there. And then secondly, there's actually that joining of that knowledge, joining the maths teams together. I think there's actually mileage to be had in bringing teams together and reporting what we saw, talking it through, having all those discussions, because I think people need to share some of that experience as well, and then getting them to commit to whatever it is we find that might make a difference for the benefit, and really getting people co-creating the answers, not just hearing, oh, I've got to do this now, have I? Because I think that's where it can go badly wrong with this kind of thing. It's very important that we take enough people into the thinking in the first place, and that's where I can get into an occasional lesson with some teacher or ask her about her practice in this element. Then we can share all of that, particularly with the two teams at Martyrs and at Delisle to begin with, and then hopefully cascade from there. Because I think if we saw that there was real improvement this year and next year amongst ourselves, it would be relatively easier to cascade that. But it's important that we keep the conversations. It's one of these things you won't quite know where it goes until it goes.
I do think definitely Year 7 maths teachers need to know what Year 6 children can do.
Yes.
I mean, last year I had a set of my books. My books were borrowed by in the early streets, one of the maths consultants at Leicester.
Yeah.
She borrowed some of my books to share with Key Stage 3 teachers, because she said, I don't think they have a clue just what children can do in Year 6.
And that, and of course Richard and various teachers from here have done likewise.
Yeah, he's been very good in his coming year.
Yeah.
But even when you say cutting down hours that staff send out, there's no reason you can't still have borrow books and things.
Absolutely.
Because then you don't have to leave your own building, but you can still see some of the actual work that goes into Year 6.
And
I've been included some visits to primary schools then, is this correct?
Sorry, say that again.
You mentioned that there were going to be some visits of teachers, secondary
Well,
school, primary school.
Yeah, I think to begin with, we want to see what's going on in Year 6 and what's going on in Year 7. So it will be myself and the core team leading the project having a look. And based on what we see, what we find, what our recommendations are, I think then the next aspect of that perhaps is to get people to go and see just how hard these what we call it HPAs, but at that stage they haven't achieved their mark yet, but how hard those students are working in Year 6 and what they're actually achieving and what's going on in their heads and how it's all coming together. Sorry, Anthony.
I think this is going to be a fascinating line of inquiry, and my feeling is probably that the truth lies in in bits in all of those things. But when you are doing your sort of scoping research, could I offer a thought? You look at all these things. Could I suggest you shine a particularly searching beam on the idea that you put up there about do HPAs actually sort of work together in groups? Are they known to each other? My experience from the higher level is peer-supported learning is invariably linked with assessment. And having worked in learning support in my latter years, the people who disengage with that's when they start going downhill on that. I've got a gut feeling that
it would help to pair and match up the most able.
Yes, I mean I know it might
to create that
heretical thoughts like streaming and setting and things. I think even informal networks can help and do help actually in the higher levels. And I'm assuming that most of the students I've encountered have been HPAs at least one time in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting because anecdotally, our most successful A-level cohort was 3 years ago, both in terms of our raw scores, in terms of the percentage A's and A stars we got, but also if you look at it in terms of their value added, because they weren't academically, and yet without a day up, they were the year group where they helped and supported
Yeah.
each other to the greatest degree. If you look back to that year group, you often saw 3 or 4 sixth formers all sitting around together, all going through a history essay or a biz essay or a geography essay, and they were very supportive and very cohesive. And I think it's a really interesting point. Yeah.
Do you think, because one of the challenges in the new handbook is they're really wanting us to think more about curriculum, and I think actually for once it's something that's driven by schools rather than necessarily Ofsted, but do you think there might be implications for higher prioritizing children generally in terms of curriculum? Because obviously we're talking about maths and the implications of mastery here, and whether that's going to be a benefit or whether we need to supplement, but
Well, I think at the moment we're talking about engagement, aren't we, really? We're talking about people being really excited by the maths they're doing. So is the work that they're given and the challenges they're given so buzzy and exciting that they can't help but achieve whatever at the end of the line? I mean, at the end of the day, an exam's an exam and a mark's a mark, but these young people should be absolutely exuding total 100% enthusiasm for their mathematics as well as for everything else they do. And we need to look at what it is that's depressing that at the moment, and once we've worked out a key to unlock it, hopefully that key can be shared with you.
It might, I was just sorry to say, it could be across all of the subjects, this problem might exist. So.
I think we'll start with the maths. I'm just not clear as to, you find out what is in essence best practice. Are you then saying, having a meeting with all the interested parties and teachers, etc., and saying, we very much like, or we suggest, or we have found that this works very well, or have they got an option of doing it, or are you saying this is how it's going to be done in the future, and at the end of it all, what way are you? I suppose results speak for themselves, but do you have a plan for monitoring and assessing the outcome of implementing these changes?
Well, first of all, we need to do the research, and it's one of these slightly chicken and egg situations. You don't quite know where you're going to be until you're there. Secondly, I think we can always identify best practice and so on. We can also identify bad practice, or we can identify something that's not working for our children in this particular situation. Because one of the things that is very interesting about teaching is that what works in one school doesn't always work in another one. What works in one classroom doesn't work in another one. The chemistry can be different. So I'm always a bit careful of saying to teachers, this is the only way you can do this, you must do that, because there's nothing turns people off more quickly than doing that. What's likely to be more effective is to say, we found this seems to be very effective. Look what happened to Alice. She results and everything else has improved all recognition, and that teacher going, gosh, yes, I can see the value of that, and getting them to adopt that for themselves. I mean, of course, what's non-negotiable at the end of the day, as you said, are poor results or ineffective teaching. So, this is a contribution to how we teach in our MAT. And in our MAT, there's going to be all sorts of things going on simultaneously, and possibly in classrooms next door to one another might be two very different approaches, because that teacher is amazing at teaching children in that way, and that gives that passion and learning for those students. I do think we have to be a little bit careful with polarities. I'm not one for saying that one size fits all, and I know teachers well enough to know that that's rarely the case. And I've seen some nods around the table.
It's like a health check, isn't it? Almost like if we know, so a common thing that, say, our primaries are using is the maths no problem scheme, which is a mastery approach that quite a few of our primary schools are using. They're textbook based, and it's almost looking at, well, what's working there, what might not be working, what lessons can we learn, and might there be some questions if you're teaching using this system that we could learn from this, because maybe if you're that year 7 teacher or year 6 teacher with some higher grade, which they're going to have prioritising children in their classroom, are there certain things you might need to be more mindful of and be more wary of?
I'm mindful and wary of the clock. It's been a long meeting so far. My final question is, are you happy for me to proceed with this? We'll see how we get on.
I can't wait to see what you find.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.